and my name is Christine Perret, and I'm very pleased to welcome you to the AREAE webinar on November 18th, 2015 on the topic of selecting use cases for enterprise augmented reality introduction. I'm the Executive Director of the AR for Enterprise Alliance, and I have some members with me here today from whom you'll be hearing a lot more information. I wanted to just take a moment to let you know that we are recording, and therefore this will be available for playback as an archive from our YouTube channel. In addition to this webinar today, we have had several other webinars already this fall. If you'd like to go back, you can watch one that introduces you to the AREAE programs, members, and committees. That was a couple of months ago. Most recently, on October 29th, we had a webinar on the subject of why and how to introduce enterprise augmented reality. In 2016, we will continue our series, and we would welcome those of you who are on this webinar to contribute your thoughts, give us your feedback in a survey that will be sent to you. It will appear when the webinar closes, but you'll also be sent the same link by email afterwards, and that's a great place to let us know what you'd like to hear more about in the future. If you'd like to sign up to get announcements, occasional announcements, and especially to receive our newsletter, I'd like to encourage you to go to our website, thearea.org, and there are several places where you can find a button to go to the register form, or you can just type in thearea.org and /register to complete let us know your name and contact information so that we can keep you informed. Well, I just also wanted to take this opportunity to share with you a little background and context for this webinar, as well as for our organization in general. We're all about making sure that augmented reality is deployed and in realistic ways in many industries. And in order to explain to people why augmented reality deployment could make a difference, it could improve workplace performance, I like to talk about first that there's this very, very deep and rich enterprise information system you're all familiar with, and it's getting bigger and deeper and more complex all the time as more and more data is being added from sensors, from all kinds of devices and objects connected by the Internet of Everything. And analytics are continually being improved to help us mine the information, make sense of it, either for machine and automation purposes or for helping humans to make decisions. And as those information systems get deeper, more complex, and represent a greater and greater investment for companies, it's important for there to be some greater, more powerful methods of visualizing this information in real time. Because by visualizing information with augmented reality in context, we can expect to get the most relevant information to the workplace at the time when it's needed. One of the benefits of having the most relevant information is perhaps a reduction in the time necessary to train, but also to perform rare and complex tasks, because we're not having to switch modes between the instructions and the real world back to the instructions. And there's a variety of different nuances in this reduction of time that we may hear more about. We also know that augmented reality can be used to use better human resources, experts, or other kinds of limited resources, by bringing them to the disposal of the person who's out in the field or who's on the shop floor with some kind of an issue. And by having extra support, perhaps from experts, or having documentation, information, and technical communication products, that can help to reduce errors committed during a procedure and make higher quality products and results. And also having the same sensors, the same technologies attached to our augmented reality systems, we can also begin to capture, record, and certify that procedures are performed in compliance with policies, either corporate policies or other regulatory national or international policy. And by reducing time to perform tasks, reducing errors, we can expect a reduction in cost as well, or an increase in quality. And all of these factors are combined to help improve operational efficiency in businesses. Now, how much operational efficiency just all depends. Our vision is that the value of augmented reality is so great that there should be, and there now is, a global member-based organization that's taking care and doing what it can to accelerate the adoption of augmented reality in enterprise. This process begins with two different groups of organizations: customers, large enterprises primarily, that can use augmented reality to improve their performance, as I spoke to you just a few minutes ago. In addition, they're trying to get their needs met by partnering with or getting technologies from providers. These companies have solutions or components and services, a variety of things that they can use to address the needs of the large enterprise customers. And in the middle between these two groups, there is another segment of the ecosystem that I'd like to speak about, and that's the non-commercial entities. These are trade associations in other domains other than technology and augmented reality, research institutes, universities, government organization, a whole variety of non-commercial entities that are a bit accelerating and helping to lubricate this cycle, this beneficial system between the providers and customers, in what we like to think of as a brand new, vibrant technology ecosystem. And you're going to be hearing from people today who are part of that ecosystem and who are helping to make this all very, very successful. The people who are on the call today, as well as other members of the AR for Enterprise Alliance, represent those three ecosystem segments: the customers, the providers of technologies, and the non-commercial entities. And we're collaborating. We've provided through this organization a platform for collaboration that permits a better integration of the components and services, a better understanding of what's needed, and then being able to address that to provide the best customer outcomes. This is all going to, I mentioned these are, that it is a collaboration. These are the logos of our 22 members to date. And we're very, very pleased and proud to have very large brands as well as very, very small companies and unknown brands, brands that are emerging as thought leaders in this exciting new technology field. Together, we're helping enterprise augmented reality to get across the trough of disillusionment a little bit, with a little fewer bumps and a little less depth of discouragement or deception or feeling of frustration with augmented reality. So one of the steps, of course, to getting across that trough is careful selection of the use cases. And for that, I'd like to now transfer the presentation over to Jay Kim, who is here to speak to us from Apex Labs. Jay, I've just given you the ball, so I hope you can share your screen with us.
Okay, great. Thanks, Christine. And I've got the webinar side going. So thanks everyone who's dialed in for your time listening in on the webinar. And just to set the stage on how the rest of the hour is going to go, I'm going to present a really quick set of slides, just serving as a backdrop for the panel discussion that is going to take place later on. So we'll try and make the presentation fairly quick because I believe most of you, I'm sure, are looking to get real live insights from the three panelists that we have today. So my name is Jay Kim. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Apex Labs, which is a technology provider targeting specifically smart glasses in the AR space. I'd like to first get started by going through how large enterprises and some of our customers go through a new technology injection process in the enterprise. So any new piece of technology, whether or not it's a new operating system in IT targeting PCs, going all the way down to wearable devices, and of course mobile devices in between, it's got to go through a set of steps that make that specific piece of technology be a part of the enterprise IT workflow. So that means analysis, preparation, and certification by IT departments, specifically with respect to enterprise AR, which regardless of whether or not you're deploying them on handheld devices or on wearable devices, fundamentally these are mobile devices that has to get managed. So the notion of device security and management and authentication so that these systems are becoming a part of the broader workflow that is being governed by enterprise IT users it's a required step in a scaled up use case of this technology. And by scaling up, what I mean is a meaningful deployment of this technology that is being used by users at the end of the day, rather than having a series of sandbox projects without a clear timeline for use case introduction in a real operating environment. There is a pretty significant training component that's associated with this. Of course, with any kind of new technology, users have to get accustomed to the new workflows that the technology brings in. And of course, on the other side, by some of the business unit sponsors and by IT, the selection of use cases has to support the creation, curation, and the presentation of content. And in short, what that means is, what kind of content are you going to show? How are you going to manage it? And how are you going to create it if it's not there? And really, all of this at the end of the day is to have the goal of deploying an actual use case that is centered around a business return on investment, rather than deploying a single device and a single application, because AR, hopefully, all of you on the webinar appreciate this, but AR at the end of the day is going to become a very core piece of technology that is being used fairly broadly within any kind of an organization. So enterprises certainly don't want to have a short-sighted view on investing into a single piece of the puzzle. So that leads us to the two form factor options for AR today. You've got the all too familiar smartphones and tablets, and then to the right you have smart glasses. How I would like to set the stage is that for smartphones and tablets, the benefits are that it's got users and IT departments and developers have a high degree of familiarity with respect to this technology. And AR on tablets and smartphones, because of the sensors and the higher grade processor associated with it, unlocks the more holistic use cases of AR overlays. And the drawbacks, of course, is that you still have to hold the device, and you have to use you cannot be accessing content as easily if you're working with your hands or if your job requires you to do that. Whereas smart glasses, the benefits and drawbacks are a mirror image of that, where benefits obviously is that it's a hands-free and a heads-up user interface. And the drawback is that there is still a significant lack of familiarity and also a higher cost associated with the solution because the form factors themselves that are running on AR are less commoditized. And that was the last backdrop that I wanted to set before we jumped into the panel discussion, where let me quickly introduce the panelists. We've got Nathan Greiner from Design Mill, Mary Claire McLaughlin from Newport News Shipbuilding, and Aaron Tate from Apex Labs. And I'll just stop here and ask, starting with Nathan, to just quickly introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Jade. This is Nathan Greiner with Design Mill. I'm the president of Design Mill. We are classified as a system integrator. So we would be working for larger customers. We do a lot of work in the Department of Defense, as well as some of other manufacturing, preparing augmented reality experiences. So we prepare, take the best-in-class hardware, put it together with the best-in-class software, and develop these prototypes, proof of concepts, and then ultimately get it to a solution. So,
and Mary Claire, please.
Yes, I'm Mary Claire McLaughlin. I am a project engineer on the augmented reality team at Newport News Shipbuilding. We've been working with AR for about 5 years in the yard now, and we also have a teaming agreement with a startup company called Index AR Solutions that allows us to do augmented reality work commercially. So I am responsible for leading the implementation of AR at the shipyard and also as a part of that commercial arm.
And lastly, Aaron Tate from Apex.
Hi, I'm Aaron Tate. I'm the Vice President of Customer Solutions here at Apex Labs. I lead the services and support organization for Apex and lead all of the delivery of augmented reality and our product called Skylight to our customers and partners across a number of different industries. And I've been doing this for about 3 years as we've grown across the AR space. So thanks very much for your time.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks everybody. So as the start of the panel discussion, I'd like to start with the first of the 6 questions that we'd like to discuss at the webinar today. And the first one deals with based on our members' experiences, what factors that an AR project manager must prioritize when selecting a use case. So that's Mary Claire, in your title, you have AR project manager, so I'm going to start with you.
Okay. For me, I think that the first factor to consider is just whether or not the technology is ready for the use case. So a lot of times people see AR and they think that it can do everything the first time they see it, and it's kind of convincing them of the current state of the technology and where that can provide value. So considering factors in that case, such as how you're going to target a space or target an application, what the environmental factors are in that space as far as safety and lighting and the conditions the user is working in, and then also where the 3D content is coming from. So those are just really the functional aspects as far as what the technology can do today. And then based on that, where then can the technology provide the most value? So this can sometimes be subjective. Sometimes it's helping people become more efficient in doing their jobs. Sometimes it's improving quality. Sometimes it's improving safety. But finding the areas with the highest return on investment, what the most valuable use cases are. But then at the same time also, there are potentially high valued use cases that aren't conducive to an AR solution today. So you really have to understand when AR can have an impact, and then when the current state of the technology just simply isn't ready for that use case. So it's pairing those two things together, in my opinion.
Nathan?
Yeah, I'll follow up on that. I mean, definitely is the technology ready? What we've done in the past, is ability to possibly use tablets or something you're more familiar with if you have a mobile developer. Start with something that you can utilize with the actual tablet, and then transition to glasses. Because it is a learning curve. If you're new to the AR space, what tools you're using, and so in terms of the use case, I mean, I would say really look at simplifying it, walk before you run. So in the past we've done very small part of it. You want to take a lot of times if it's a training procedure, it's not necessarily written in terms of it's written to be in a PDF when you pull it up on a computer. So one, you have to pick a impactful training procedure, then modify that, and then learn with the technology and say, well, this use case is training, and then we have to basically modify the way we think. So if it's an instructional designer, they're not thinking in AR, they're thinking in terms of that. So I would just say, start slow, possibly utilize technology that you're familiar with, and then kind of grow from there.
And lastly, Aaron.
Yeah. So what I've found is that across the use cases that we've helped drive on manufacturing, logistics, and the other major industries that we've been supporting with smart glasses, that choosing use cases early on that provide the most value, as Mary Claire mentioned, particularly around reducing rework, increasing efficiency, and also reducing the incidents around safety, provide the most value to customers, and make sure that you're driving home the benefit to key stakeholders. But also just making sure that you focus that you're not drastically changing the way that users are working on a day-to-day basis. Just making sure that you're not trying to tackle too much with the users initially, so that it's not so off-putting to them, or it changes the way that they actually are doing their job or performing the hands-on task that they're working on. Choosing those use cases that provide that key, the right amount of value, but also making sure that the users are getting as much, basically solving their problems and getting as much benefit as possible, so that they're also pushing to their stakeholders that they want to, that they see a benefit in this as well. They don't want, a lot of the businesses that we work with, you don't want to see that you're driving this as a technology solution to a problem that the management sees, not necessarily instead of the user seeing. So we like to take the approach of user first, management second, but also choosing those use cases that provide value, so that the business also wants to push and drive forward.
So thanks everyone for the insights here. I've got a follow-up question just to get down into this topic a little bit deeper. So based on your respective experiences, and it sounds like there's certainly a need to match some of the use case selections against the capabilities and the limitations of the technology that's out there today. So given this, and based on your experience again, what are some of the use cases today that you would be less likely to recommend as the first AR use case to get started on? I'll start with Nate.
I would say, again, I'm all for walking before you run. So, in terms of complex tasking, I would say if you're new to AR, definitely stick to something that may not, like object recognition. Some of these things maybe you want to start more on terms of image recognition, which would be simpler. So if you've got on a head-mounted display, you can do that versus, hey, I'm looking at object recognition, 3D overlays. I mean, this really starts to get into a complex. You need an entire team to do that. So starting out, I would say the simpler the better. and shy away from highly complex use cases that tackle, let's say, multiple technologies in an individual experience.
And Mary Claire?
At Newport News, some of the most popular, the more mature use cases would be inspection, so actually direct overlay of the product model in the physical space so that you can compare the as-built to the as-designed condition, and you're able to see any differences between the two. Also just inspecting for the installation or the removal of a specific part, so bringing the product model in to make sure that something has been installed correctly is one of our more simple and mature use cases. And then also a very popular one is just the step-by-step work instruction. So taking away the paper documentation, the paper drawings, and the procedure, and providing an electronic work document that utilizes AR just to deliver information to the user faster, more efficiently, and in a very intuitive and simple way to allow them to do their job faster and with a better quality.
And Aaron, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, so I would definitely agree with both Nathan and Mary Claire in their answers. I would say, for us, we try to limit the amount of externalities that could potentially reduce user adoption. So when selecting scenarios and use cases for our customers, we tend to shy away from complex overlays or being able to recognize objects and other things like that. Instead, we focus more on code scanning and complex procedures that can be made simple and provided to the users in more of a streamlined format, and documenting site conditions, as Mary Claire was also mentioning. I think those are the things that many enterprise users and enterprise business IT owners also have the systems and the backends in place to maintain and cultivate and to receive that data. What we've seen is that a lot of the customers that we have don't have complex backend systems or data sets of 3D models to be able to feed in and to recognize a lot of the inputs that they would potentially want to do on object recognition or 3D overlays. So what we've done is Apex has targeted those scenarios that can leverage the existing systems that they already have, like workforce management systems, enterprise resource planning systems, or manufacturing execution systems, tie into those and then provide that information and also feedback from the field so that they're actually feeding the systems and returning value on the systems that they already have.
Great. Yeah, I think just from the three different perspectives that we heard, there are certainly different kinds of paths that users can take in order to introduce this technology in, and some of that certainly does depend on the kinds of form factor, whether or not it's handheld or smart glasses that are going to be selected as your initial use case introduction, and then migrating to one or the other. So the next question is, before I actually go into the next question, I did want to acknowledge that we are seeing the questions coming in, and we will answer them. We will save time at the end of the webinar to go through and answer as many of those as relevant. So thanks for sending those in, and do keep those coming. The next topic is more of a project management and business strategy question on defining milestones and schedules, and AR projects needing to adhere to them, guiding success. Nathan, I'll start with you. What are your thoughts on being very disciplined with respect to the stated project plan?
In terms of a project plan, we're in a space where sometimes it's, somebody gets excited about technology and then they purchase a piece of equipment, and somebody in the organization may not have the skill sets, and it's kind of a ad hoc. We're playing around with this, and hey, let's try this, and I would say we're to the point where AR is being adopted, and this is really a good plan has to be set in place even at the prototyping stage, and say, well, what is it we're looking to get out of this? What is that the drive? How, for instance, ROI? Can we shorten the amount? So really, in terms of customer expectations, which may be an internal customer, what are we trying to get at? Management needs to see a return on investment. So I say definitely you need to lay a plan out. I mean, just like any other project, if you're putting in a new production line, you have a detailed WBS or a work breakdown structure. This has to be to the same. I mean, sometimes we're in more of an R&D phase, but a lot of times, if we're going to integrate this on the floor, I mean, there has to be again a good plan with the milestones, and then I think that's much more successful than kind of an ad hoc R&D take research aspect. So as this technology matures, I think you'll see more and more of that, and it'll really make an impact if you have a disciplined approach.
Great. And Aaron?
Yeah, Nathan, I would definitely agree with you on that. I would say that because this is new technology and it's really a new way of interacting, a new way of presenting, a new way of doing work that a lot of the businesses haven't necessarily programmed for budgetary-wise, technology-wise, et cetera. I think it's critical, actually maybe even more critical than typical IT projects, and to set out and understand initially what the overall goal of the organization is from the different stakeholders that are involved, as well as the key milestones that need to be taken into account across the business. Like Nathan mentioned, we typically start out, and a lot of the initial customer contacts that we see are through innovation organizations and R&D, and making sure that those innovation teams understand and are solving for the business level problems. They know the milestones and the criteria for success that will help drive overall user adoption, not just in the innovation space, but also across business, and solve those the business needs and the problems that the users are experiencing. So I would say definitely this is critical, as well as making sure that your IT organization understands those security as well as networking and the implications and a lot of the IT best practices that need to be put into place early on to ensure success for a larger rollout, not just one or two devices, but hundreds of devices.
And Mary Claire, last not least.
I second what Aaron and Nathan are saying. Pretty much, I think that it's beneficial to any project to have a plan laid out and to try to work to that plan. But I do think that you have to allow some flexibility in that plan and allow yourself the ability to pivot and change that plan as often as necessary, just because we're working with a new technology, and when things are changing as often as they are changing in this environment, it's important to allow your project the ability to pivot as necessary. But again, that kind of comes down to if you're working in a research and development environment, or if you're working towards a direct project, and how strictly you would need to stick to your plan kind of based on that.
Right, and of course I'll wrap up this topic by saying that goes on without saying that any successful project, whether or not it is strictly adhering to plan or if there are some deviations, as you're starting, goes on without saying that you do have to be very disciplined about setting the right kinds of milestones and setting realistic deadlines so that that it can result in success at the end of the day. Next question is more of an IT question regarding data security and network coverage for mobile devices. So I'll start with Aaron here. Are these data security and network coverage and other kinds of different considerations for mobile devices very important when selecting the first use case, and why?
I would say it depends, particularly on the customer's from our perspective, the customers, what they're trying to get from their initial use case. If they're trying to prove kind of a proof of concept of that augmented reality is something that's viable for their users to use in their day-to-day job and to get value out of, I would say that there are a couple of ways that they can demonstrate that without having to go through a lot of the critical security and network coverage pre-checks. But I think that this is something that all customers should be considering and should be trying to at least put a plan in place, even if they're playing with the technology or trying to better understand how the technology could potentially benefit them. I think that involving IT and network security and InfoSec and the cybersecurity teams of these enterprise organizations early and often, I think that ultimately leads to the success of a project, even if it is just the first initial tranche into deploying AR. You need to understand, particularly for to see how this will overall impact the business, and from a perspective of ROI, how much investment are you going to need to put in when all of your users need to be connected to Wi-Fi when they're at their job site? And they were previously, especially in the case of of transient or distributed workforce, may not have had access to Wi-Fi or to cellular in the locations that they're at. So there may be some infrastructure costs that are associated with those things. So I would say definitely a consideration, although there are some cases in which you may not have to.
And Mary Claire?
I agree with what Aaron's saying here. I think it's always important to consider these factors, but I don't think that they're necessarily need to be a focus point for choosing your first use case. I think they're much more important to the long-term transition of the technology, but a lot of times with that first use case, it's about proving the value of the technology, and I believe you can do that if you choose the correct use case without diving into and trying to tackle some of the bigger hurdles of connecting to the network and the security information obstacles. So I think that always important to consider, but a lot of times you can choose the right initial use case that can just show the value of the technology before you jump over all of those hurdles.
And Nathan?
Yeah, the data security piece, I'm echoing the Mary Claire there on saying, well, you may not need that, but you can get around it. For instance, if you put a project completely on a device, you can do it in a disconnected environment. Granted, if you're using, some kind of search that's looking for objects or anything, you're going to need to be connected to reach back to that database. So perhaps you choose that use case that doesn't need that, but long-term, data security is, huge. I mean, in terms of, let's say, very sensitive applications. Let's say you're diffusing a bomb or something, and someone puts in the wrong. They're able to get in and change the color of a wire from blue to red. You can see where this is a major issue in terms of we have a whole set of new security concerns when someone could possibly get in and tamper with your information overlay. So I'm sure there'll be, over the next few years, a lot of things coming out, products. I know there's some other AREAE members that are working solely on security and AR and keeping a lot of those devices, once they move outside the area, they shut down. So you'll see that. In terms of network coverage, I mean, of course, we all want 7G or whatever to be able to get to this next level. And so I would say if you can minimize that network coverage and push as much as you can onto the device for that specific use case. I know that can't always be the case, but for a proof of concept, and then work with your IT folks to start to get them up to speed. Because when you show up and say, hey, I want to put this on our network, typically the IT department gets a little excited, and then really you need to look at that strategy going forward, and at least get it out there, get it on their radar, saying, hey, we're bringing mobile. I'm sure it's come with advent of Blackberries, and now, hey, I can connect my mobile device. Now we're talking wearables. I want to put Google Glass or some other thing on the network, and so that just needs to be in terms of getting it at least at the corporate level, saying, hey, I need this in the strategy long term, and what are we going to do? And then I know there'll be softwares and other things that'll come out, that'll merge, that'll make it easier for us for data security going forward.
Okay, great. Next question is on what are some of the most popular use cases for pilots, pilot meaning pilot projects, and introduction of augmented reality? I'm also going to weave a question from the audience in as a part of it. And if you're able to answer this, I'd like to also ask you to cover what has been the most successful use case supported with AR so far from your experience, and how that use case was discovered. So let's start with Mary Claire on this.
Okay. I think I spoke to this a little bit earlier, where from the Newport News shipbuilding side, two of our most popular use cases, one is inspection and another is step-by-step instructions. And we've had very successful projects run in both of those. One was an inspection use case that we did for inspecting for some temporary structure, where we were able to reduce the time for that inspection from 32 hours down to an hour and a half using a tablet-based AR solution that allowed them to walk into a space and view the product model in that space and determine whether or not pieces had been removed. And then another was just replacing a drawing or a paperwork instruction with a electronic 3D model AR solution that allowed them to identify weld joints, and that again showed a large reduction in time for time, I guess, and schedule for that task. Both of those were determined and chosen based on the amount of time that the user actually spent trying to read the drawings and determine in the paper documentation to put himself to work. So both of those cases were times where hours, several hours a day were spent with their heads in a paper drawing, and we realized that was not value-added work. And if we could deliver them that information faster using AR, that would be a successful use case. And in both cases there, that turned out to be true.
And Nathan?
I think one of the best ones we've had so far, it goes along with Mary Claire's visualization, but we're more upfront in the design of systems, so you use a lot of 3D models, and what we built was this framework which allowed, this was a Marine Corps Department of Defense use case where it's very hard for us to get feedback in real time. We can't bring people into the room and say, well, let's look at this new design for a complex, highly complex system. And so what we did is we built an AR proof of concept that allowed us to, as we do design iterations, it would allow us to quickly push that out into AR. So, for instance, one was you could visualize the Humvee, which is a military vehicle, in a ship. You could visualize it pretty much anywhere, but then also you could visualize on a Humvee in terms of, I'm going to do an information overlay. But the real crux of it was, it took so long to get feedback, and then again, you're looking at drawings on a page. This is 3D visualization in real time on top of an existing asset, or we want to see how that works inside a bay, or how it's going to look. How can we put this new, I'll just call them a widget, on top of a vehicle? So I think that was really one of the most successful, because the speed in which we could get feedback from each design iteration was increased, and then we could also cut out prototype in terms of, hey, we're going to build, let's say we plan on building 5 prototypes, we're able to cut one of those out. So if you can cut the prototype, cut it out by 1 iteration, and then the speed in which you get feedback, as well as the varied feedback, you're looking at, I want the person using the end device to give me the real feedback that's going to be used this every day, not a group of designers that don't necessarily have that. I mean, we need both, but I think that was really a very impactful one for us. We also do some, we're doing some manufacturing use cases in terms of inspection. We're waiting on the object recognition is in flux a little bit. We're continuing to work on that. So, but I think the inspection, because that's an instant savings when you can pull it up, and the speed in which you can get information, as well as the visualization, is really where we're seeing some impacts.
Okay, and Aaron?
So from the perspective of popular use cases for pilots, the initial starting point for a lot of the customers that we see is to start off with something that's really that happens across most enterprises and happens very, very often, and is a high cost, is to get feedback in real time from an expert, not have to ship, have someone travel across the globe or across the state or across the country to get to a site to see and to help diagnose in real time. So that's one of the most popular starting points, and the way that enterprises see a lot of value very quickly. But the most successful we've seen is to take that concept, but also interleave that into complex procedures. So as the users work on their day-to-day process, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be field service, whether it be logistics, interleave those points in which they can get help, or to watch videos, or to see, to look at images for reference, to be able to help them and not have to go through and do rework, or to stop and to leave, go to a site, get more information, and come back. That's been the most successful part of our product, is to be able to augment those complex procedures, show them in real time at the point of work, but also help provide that feedback from remote support as well.
Great. So next question specifically deals with smart glasses, and we touched on this on some of the earlier questions, but again, this deals with matching the capabilities and limitations of smart glasses or hands-free displays. So to the panel, and I'll start with Nathan on this. What are some of the characteristics of use cases or pilot projects that are well suited for implementation on tablet devices over glasses? And I'm starting with you specifically, Nathan, because you're the person that has experience across both.
Okay, I would say, it's for tablets. There's 2 things. One, if you're prototyping, get it on a tablet first, and then take it to the glasses after that. If you're doing a high visual search, of course, sometimes the latest and greatest glasses drains their battery. But in terms of the actual use cases, if you've got a guy that's using his hands to do this assembly process, and you say, oh, here, hold your tablet, when your hands are completely greasy, hold your tablet up. So I would say, in terms of the characteristics, you really have to pick something in terms that won't impact the end user. So if we look at whether it's an assembly piece, or maybe this is just information, I want to hold it up and view, like in that design scenario, I want to view how this is going to look. Perfect case for a tablet, or even a smartphone. Some of the inspection things that we've done in the past also, you can have your smartphone with you or your tablet. But as you get into the heads-up display, or the glasses, I think that's where it's more, you want a hands-free experience, and I guess our experience has been in, I want to showcase this this training procedure or this maintenance procedure, and I don't want to be able to, I don't want to have to touch anything. So we're working on, of course, gesture and some voice recognition. Again, usually these places aren't quiet like they are back at the office, right? It's a loud, people are banging and you're trying to talk to your device. So, working on that gesture potentially is also maybe tying that into something or even putting a button on your glove would help. But those are kind of our experiences related to glasses versus tablets.
And Mary Claire, I understand that all of your deployed use cases internal to Newport News have been on tablets. So what would be your insights on good use cases and pilot projects on tablets?
I think any use case which doesn't require you to have persistent AR is suited for a tablet form factor. So something like the step-by-step, let's say, removal of a component, where a skilled craftsman can be shown via the tablet which bolts need to be removed, but he doesn't actually need to see an augmentation of a wrench removing the bolt. He can get that instruction from the tablet, set the tablet down, perform the task, and then pick the tablet back up to get information about his next step. You don't need that instruction constantly in your field of view when you're performing those kinds of tasks. And then also the inspection use cases where you are looking for a direct overlay of something, where we just have not found to date we have not found a heads-up display that's mature enough for us to deploy for a direct overlay in an industrial environment. So that again would be a place where a tablet form factor would work just well.
And Aaron?
Yeah, I would say I agree with both. I mean, it's the situations in which you need to keep your hands on your work. You can't have all your instructions on a tablet. The same way with complex overlays and being able to display 3D data in real time. Most of the smart glasses that we see on the market that are generally available don't have the hardware to really to really display those complex drawings and other things like that in an effective manner. So, or to recognize objects in the environment. So those types of situations, when choosing use cases, I would say go more towards the tablet as a selection.
Great. And the last question that we have for this panel discussion today is the question of whether or not companies and users should introduce AR in multiple use cases in parallel, and the benefits and risks of the strategy. From our experience at Apex, which Aaron can certainly speak to, we do see lots of organizations that are inadvertently working on multiple parallel projects between different business units, and obviously people are doing this because there are very good benefits associated with their respective use cases. So actually, to that end, I'll start with Aaron on this one.
Yeah, I would say it's fine for them to start introducing AR in multiple use cases and across different business units. But one thing that we've seen is that it's really critical to have those coordinated by a central entity, or to have at least some alignment across those different business units, so that they understand and there's not duplicative work, or they're going after the same the same use case or scenario that's solved in different business units. And that's why I would say the benefit would be, if you go after a lot in parallel, you get to understand a lot, you got to get a lot of user feedback, but there's a downfall in that as well, that you could be doing quite a bit of rework or quite a bit of duplicative work when employing that strategy.
Great. And Mary Claire?
I agree it's beneficial to have it introduced in multiple use cases in parallel, just for the kind of lessons learned and the fact that many companies are large enough to where AR can be valuable in many different areas of the business. But you do need to kind of have that central group or that communication where the work is not being done in two different areas and they're unaware of each other or unaware of each other's successes or failures. Like with Newport News, we've got several different use cases that go on throughout the company, but our team and our group is kind of the headquarters for all of those efforts, and that's proven a successful way to kind of get that technology out there in many different areas, get a bunch of different groups familiar with it, talking about it, and that has led to a lot of growth and a lot of new use cases for us. So that's been a good approach.
Great. And last word goes to Nathan.
Okay, yeah, I would say, based on the size of your organization, that matters. I think if you're, it depends on where you are in the organization. If you're looking to just engage with AR, part of your use cases and part of your discovery will be understanding the technology stack related to that in terms of, is it object recognition? Are you using glasses? Are you using a tablet? Are we looking at any kind of AI? So as these things come down the path, you really, in terms of the technology, if you're going large breadth in technology, probably very sharp focus on a use case. So then, the other side is I can try several different things in, like Newport News is they're trying various other things in different areas, but the risk associated with that, if your organization isn't ready for that, you can fail if you go too wide, too fast. So in terms of if you're one of the champions inside your organization, you want to make sure that this is being accepted because we are dealing with affecting human behavior with AR. I would say, keep it smaller. This is my opinion, keep it smaller so you have a better chance of success and you can hone in on that use case, iterate, and then really have a smoke-in example that will propel your organization forward and get adoption more quickly inside your organization.
Okay, great. Thanks, Nathan, for that. And I know that we ran a couple minutes over. I will close this webinar out by thanking everyone who listened in and apologize to all for the technical difficulties regarding the slides. And we try to get to as many of the audience questions as we could along the way, so hopefully you found it useful. And for more information, check us out at www.thearea.org. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jay. Great job. Bye-bye, everyone.